Zigzag and One, a place where we honestly discuss how to embrace the zigs and the zags in our crazy lives. Running away is not an option. Living in defeat is not an option. Instead, learning how to keep moving forward is what we'll do together, one nugget of wisdom at a time. Your host is Melanie Brown. She's navigated a few zigs and zags in her life with the determination to never give up. Expect great stories and lots of laughs. Are you ready? Let's do it.
Hello, friends. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the ZIGZAG and One podcast. I'm your host, Melanie Brown. Have y'all had as much fun in this month of music as I have? It just lifts my soul to hear all about music and what it means to the guests that I have been interviewing. And today's guest, Johnny Burkhalter, he not only talks about music, but he is just so funny, and I laughed so much. And when you combine music and laughter in my book, that is awesome. So Johnny Burkhalter, he's also known as the Johnny B. And I just really love that handle, so I tried it on for myself, the Mel B. And I quickly realized I can't have that handle because a famous Spice Girl has it. So I guess I'll just have to go by Mel. I am so eager for you to hear this episode, but let me tell you a little bit about Johnny B first. He and Natalie have been married for 5 years, and y'all, they have the most precious 2 kids. Just beautiful. They get to travel around the country and lead hearts to worship God. I'll be honest, if I had any musical talent, that would be my dream job. Here's 2 more fun things about Johnny. His friends, they roll their eyes because he loves to tell dad jokes, and he's never without a cup of coffee. Well, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with the Johnny B. I am super excited to continue our focus on music and how it is the fabric of our lives. Whether we're sailing through those good times or we are struggling to keep our heads above the water in those challenging times. My guest today, Johnny B, so excited to have you.
Hey, how we doing? I'm so excited to be a part of this show. Thank you so much for having me on.
I have been looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your years in the music industry. You have done lots of different things. And I guess my first question is, did your mom and dad throw a guitar in your hands and a mic in front of you and said, go for it? How did this all start?
No, absolutely. It's so funny. It was actually the opposite. I don't really come from a musical background, and my family's not really musical, but it's funny because when I started to spark an interest in music, I asked my mom if I could get a guitar, and she said no. She said between my brother and I, there was enough noise in the house, and enough chaos happening, and so she didn't want to add to that. I had an old Casio keyboard that I got, for a Christmas present, that didn't work, whatever. So when that stopped working, she kind of had made this vow to herself that she wasn't going to let any more noise in the house. But thankfully, I have an aunt who is a missionary, and she's kind of the rebel. Everybody I think in their family has that cool aunt or cool uncle or cool cousin or somebody who gives you all the gifts that your parents won't give you. So I had a cool aunt who happened to be a missionary. And so she kind of saw that interest in me for music. And one year just got me my first acoustic guitar. I had to leave it at my grandmother's house for about six months or so until I figured out how to play it. And then once my mom saw that I knew a thing or two and that I'd actually taken an interest in it, she let me bring it home. But it was a journey just to get that guitar in the door.
It probably sounds like, I remember when our boys were little and they brought home the recorder. Now your guys are too little, But in about third, fourth grade, the music teacher does this horrible thing and they send home this musical instrument called a recorder. And it sounds like a cat that is dying.
Yeah.
and when our boys were practicing, oh my gosh, it was like nails on a chalkboard. It was awful. But I'm so glad that you were able to bring it home after 6 months. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Tell me about all the different things that you have done with music over the last 20-something years that you've been at this.
Yeah. So again, music wasn't really a part of my background or my history. So when I took an interest in it, I was kind of the first one in my family to really take an interest. And then when it kind of stuck and became, when you're growing up, you have all these phases and, things kind of play out. And 1 minute you're into video games, the next day you're into sports and whatever. So, but when I found that music was going to stick around for me, I really just began to take every opportunity. I remember being 16 years old and getting an opportunity to play in my youth band at my church. And I think I knew 3 chords, which if you know anything about church music, that's all you need to know. So I was ready, for that environment. So I just began to play every opportunity I could. I remember being a teenager and, when all my friends were, going to parties and doing whatever teenagers do, I was in my room playing guitar. I didn't even, this is probably right before YouTube hadn't quite taken off yet. So I'm old enough to remember a day and age before YouTube tutorials. So I'm just learning on my own, listening to it on my CD player, which most people probably don't even know what a CD player is now, but I had my portable CD player and I would listen to the song, and I would try to play along. And so it just began to develop. And again, every opportunity that I could to play, I would play. And I remember being, 17, 18 years old and a few friends of mine, we started a local band. Local bands are the backbone of music. They really are. But we started a local band and we thought we were so cool. We really weren't. Looking back now, those home videos, you are almost embarrassed that you hope your kids will never see. So just begin to play every chance we could, every invitation, whether it was a high school gym or a youth lock-in or whatever it was. I can remember a certain season where we had the opportunity to drive to South Carolina, which is, being from Atlanta is just up the road, but it was, we drove 4 hours one way to play for 7 kids, but we thought we were rock stars, and so that was my, so that was my experience growing up. It's just, every chance, every opportunity that we could, to play and that I could to play, we would take it.
What was it about the music that drew you in as opposed to sports or any of the other things?
Yeah. Well, again, when most kids were playing baseball, I was taking my baseball bat and pretending that it was a guitar. And so, but I think for me, music just kind of put words to the story I was trying to tell. I think music,
beautiful.
I think music is a language that, when we can't figure out how to express what we're feeling or what we're going through, music kind of provides an avenue to kind of put language in words to the story that we're trying to tell. I think, no matter what genre or style, there's probably, a type of music for everyone to kind of latch onto. And music is universal. It's not, my parents listen to music. It may be way different than what I listen to, but it's universal. So it's this, if you can figure out how to communicate through music, there's opportunity that's opened up. There's people who will never listen to you, maybe share your opinion, but they might listen to your song that you wrote. And so for me, I was finding songs and music that I related to, and even the culture of music, the skinny jeans and the rock and roll and all those things that I was drawn to as a teenager that for me provided like almost a sense of community. Music beyond being just a language, it's also a community of culture and of people. And so I remember sleeping on the couch at a local venue, and they never charged me for admission because I never left. So it was kind of hard to charge me, like
they could get rid of you.
Was Johnny here yesterday? I can't remember, So for me, it became a language to help share my story. And then beyond that, it became my community and my culture. And I was making friends, whether it was in the youth band at church or whether it was in these local concerts that I was going to. I was creating relationships. So it became the kind of the language of my life and also the culture around me as well.
I love how you're talking about music as a way to express what's going on in our lives. I find that to be true with the music that I listen to throughout my life in different seasons. It kind of speaks to me about things that I'm going through. And because I'm not musically inclined, I don't write songs, but I love listening to other people and seeing that maybe they don't have the exact same experience as I do, but what they are expressing is very relatable to what I am going through. So I love how you say that. That is just a great visual picture in a way that with words, you're making a visual picture of what that is. So tell me about what music looked like in your 20s. What did you do during that time?
Yeah. So in my 20s is kind of when it picked up. It went from being a hobby to I had a real chance at maybe making something out of it. And I'll never forget, I was a chaperone for my youth group. We went to this conference in Florida, and I'm just observing the worship team on the platform and just thinking they're so cool, And long story short, I ended up having a conversation with the director of that ministry. He was a gospel artist. And we ended up having a conversation that was a total, those things that just happen to you that, there's a greater power, a greater good kind of on your side. And it was just kind of one of those moments where I knew that there was, somebody, the man upstairs was kind of behind me and helping me out, And so we're having this conversation, and 2 weeks later, this worship team, they pull into my driveway in Ackworth, Georgia, gravel driveway. You can hear them coming from a mile away. And I'm waiting on the porch, I'm finishing up my coffee. I'm ready. This is my moment. And I had 2 bags of luggage and 2 guitars. One of them wasn't even my guitar. I was borrowing it from a friend. Little did he know he wouldn't get it back for like 2 years. But so I jumped on this tour that was already happening. I'm 22 years old, had never really left my county. If I did leave, other than that one trip to South Carolina for 7 kids, so here I am, I hop in this tour van in the middle of this tour, 22 years old with 2 bags and 2 guitars. And and from that moment on, I was 22, I'm 34, that was 12 years ago. And from that moment, I haven't looked back. And so my 20s look like different cities and different conferences. And, along the way, I met my wife later on in my 20s. Most of my 20s were spent, pursuing the dream and anywhere I could. Again, always just saying yes to opportunity has kind of been the anthem of my life. But that was my 20s. It's just a lot of traveling, a lot of learning, trying to get better at my craft. And again, a lot of learning how to tell my story through music. I can remember, on that tour, one of the stops, we were in West Virginia, and our van broke down. If you've never been on a tour and your van broke down, then you've not really been on tour. And so, I've
never been on tour. I would think that would be a neat experience. I'm not sure about the breakdown. So tell me about that.
Well, it's just inevitable. It really is. I remember we broke down in West Virginia, and I've never really told this story, but we broke down in West Virginia, and we were there longer than we had expected to be. And we weren't in like a big city. We were in the, we were back there in the what they call the holler, or what you would call like the country. And I pulled out my guitar and I began to write this song, just about being stuck in the mountains. And in that moment, I was and whoever heard it, whatever. But I was able to express that moment through a song that I was going through. And so I just, even throughout that experience of traveling and touring, I was learning how to tell my story, and I was watching other people tell their story. I was working for this gospel artist and seeing him every night share his story through music, and getting the opportunity to open up for larger, bands and large, musicians and artists with big platforms, and seeing them share their story. And again, I think I'm always drawn back to that, is that music, the songs themselves tell the story with the lyrics, but the platform of music provides an opportunity for stories to be shared too. I think for me, when an artist or a musician opens before they go into that song, and they take 2 or 3 minutes and they share the story behind the song, and then they sing the song, and all of a sudden you're there, you're in that moment. I think that's why I like country music, is because, it may not be popular or whatever, but by the time that 3 minutes and 30 seconds is up, you feel like you live that experience. And that's the power of music, is that maybe, take country music, for example. Maybe I didn't lose my dog and my house and my wife or whatever, but maybe I lost a friend, and that song connects with me, so it's incredible to me that music provides a language that stories can connect, and I think that's a good song. I think that's the testimony of a good song, is that my experience allows you to express your experience. And all of a sudden we're having this conversation. I heard somebody say one time, in the context of worship, that it's a language, and that we're teaching people. And I think music is the same thing. We're teaching people how to jump on this journey with us. And, if, as a songwriter, you kind of have to learn that kind of that art, is that I'm not just telling my story, but I want you to come along on the journey. And I want you to, by the end of this song, to have felt what I feel, and hopefully maybe something that you're going through connects with that moment.
I love everything you just said, because when you were talking about how when you go to a concert and they introduce it by explaining the background of the song, we've had that happen at several of the concerts that we have attended. And you're right, it does. It helps you understand where they are coming from, but it gives you an immediate connection. And I love when artists do that. So let's talk about when you were on tour, and even now when you're on tour, so to speak, as a worship leader. When you are in front of the audience and you are leading the worship, and you get to see the audience and their reactions and how they are led to worship God, what is that experience like? I cannot even imagine how that must fill you.
It's an incredible experience, and each environment is different. I think as far as, the worship space or the faith-based kind of space, a lot of times you're connecting the room to something bigger than yourself. And that's a whole other podcast, really, to talk about that moment in itself. It really is. It's incredible when you think about that. You pull people together. It's just like with anything. If you're somebody who maybe runs a nonprofit or does charity work, like when you pull people together for something greater, it's almost unexplainable, to have that moment where I share this all the time. You're as a worship leader, we're doing our job best when we stop leading and we're just a part of. Initially we're leading the moment. We're kind of on the front line of that moment, but then hopefully, there's a moment where I can kind of step back and I'm just a part of it, and that's the power of music in general. I think with anything is that when you can create that moment where you're a part of it together, and I think beyond that, a song that maybe that you wrote or a song that we've written or whatever, when we sing that, they came from our story, and people connect with that. That is just, it's an incredible feeling. I'm reminded of a story years and years ago, before my hair turned whatever color it is today. I was dark haired and dangerous. I tell my wife, this is before I was married. I was like, you don't believe me, but there was a moment, but I can remember I was in this venue, one of the venues where they let me, sleep on the couch, I guess. But there was, a bunch of people there. It was one of the bigger crowds I had played for at that point in time. And I can remember I'm singing this song that I wrote, and I didn't even tell the band, but we went into this chorus of a worship song, and I knew they would know it. We went to the same church. So, but I sprung it on them in that moment. I don't know why I did that, but I think the room where, like you're talking about the feeling of being in a room together with people and the power of music. I think that moment just kind of led me to sing an extra chorus. So I did. And I'll never forget after our time on the stage, which, by the way, every band there was super hard rock. And we were this, whatever we were not hard rock. So we were out of place to begin with. But I'll never forget after our moment, this young lady walks up to us, to our band, and she's just crying. And she's just, she can hardly even communicate with us what she's feeling. But she just said that last part, that whatever you sang, that was for me. And I thought, man, what a powerful moment of, together in a room that music created. I don't know that. I don't know her. I don't know her whole story. But I know in that moment, her story connected with my story. And now she's forever a part of my story. I'm forever a part of her story. So music has that power to kind of create a crossroads, between your journey and my journey. And I think when we're together in a live concert setting or a faith-based setting, whatever it is, it just, in that moment, for just maybe whatever length of time, if it's an hour or if it's, you get a 25-minute time section, whatever it is, for that length of time, our stories connect, and you can never disconnect them. You know what I mean? Like maybe you went to a Journey concert with 50,000 other people, and you may not know those people by name, but you'll forever share that moment. Stories kind of collided. And so that's the power of music, is that it just brings people together in a room, and you can't untie that bond, of people in a room, even if it's Don't Stop Believing or whatever it is you're singing, that you'll never be able to, I can remember looking over at strangers, and, we're all singing together, and we'll never see that person again, but for a moment, music had the power to bring us together. So I think that's cool. And that's, to me, my experiences of leading a room as a leader and as a musician, but also just being a part of the room, looking over to the person next to me who knows the same song I know, and we're singing together, and, we're sharing a moment or whatever. I think that's just the power of music, and the power of being in a room together with music.
Out of all the bands that you had to choose, you had to pick the sore spot one. I know. Had tickets to see Journey in Ohio near my birthday, for my 50th birthday. Big deal. Journey, my all-time favorite. And that has been canceled, sadly. I expected it, mind you, but still, it's canceled. And but yes, that connection with the people in the room. And I often look around when we're doing worship at church, and they're leading worship, and I am in the moment, and I am thinking about God, and I often look around because there is that unspoken connection with all of those other people that have a heart directed towards God. Now, you can take that same idea and go to a secular concert and experience the same thing, like you just mentioned. And it is just such an incredible experience that music does that for us. Music is one of my most favorite things for that reason.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you a tricky question. Do you think that lyrics or the music is what draws you personally into the music?
Yeah, and I was just going to say too, music has such an incredible power to pause the pain that we're going through. And I think you can find that with the right lyric. So to answer that question, which is that's a tricky question, it really is. But
I know.
But maybe you can you relate to a lyric that pauses the moment that you're going through. Maybe it's I know I've listened to instrumental music before that kind of sweeps me away for a minute, So I think what's incredible to me is that music communicates, whether it's a lyric or whether it's a guitar line, music communicates all by itself. So I think it's kind of right down the center, because I know that I've related to a powerful lyric, and I've related to a powerful moment where the music is just happening, So I think ultimately music communicates, and it doesn't. It has no respecter of how it communicates. It just communicates. It might be through a lyric, or it might be through a melody, or a guitar line, or anything like that. Some of my most, I think, influential moments of worship is just listening to the music in the background that just kind of again pauses the moment, and creates a safe refuge or a safe place. But then again, there's nothing like belting out that lyric, going down the highway by yourself or whatever, and again, don't stop believing. There's nothing like that, and you just wail it out for a minute and you forget. And it doesn't always have to be serious. Sometimes a way of pausing the things that we're going through is just by listening to a song that makes us feel good. And so I think music has that unique power to not only speak to us on maybe a deeper level, but also just create an environment where we're just letting go for a minute. And I think that's, that's just the power of music. And I think that's why it has such an influence on our life.
Well, I knew that was a tricky question going in. And now that you've explained it that way, I can totally understand both sides of it. I am more of the camp of the lyrics. And of course, Jeff, being a musician, is much more in the camp of the music. So I like yours because it blends the two very nicely. Okay, so let's talk about what you're doing now, because you told us about your earlier days as a teenager, and then you talked about your 20s, and now you're in your 30s. And I know that you and your sweet wife are doing some unique things. And so talk about that with me.
Yeah, well, where we are currently, if you're listening to this 5 years from now, hopefully we're not still in a pandemic.
Amen to that.
Lord willing. But where we are currently, we've been on staff for the last several years with a church in Atlanta. But towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, 2020, we kind of felt the pull to to take a step back and kind of to really focus on our ministry. Again, we traveled so much in our 20s, and we kind of thought that was behind us. Now that we're a little older and we've got 2 kids, and so we kind of had just kind of given that over, and I was okay with it. I told people I popped my tires. I was good. I didn't need to travel anymore. But we kind of felt like just a leading to do it again, almost like it was. I told my wife in January of this year. I said, I almost feel a sense of responsibility to do what we're, to do this. It's almost like, like not everybody has the opportunity, and not everybody has the capability to do what we do, and to travel and to go different places, and to, to pour into worship teams, and to speak to leaders, and to do all those things. So, I thought, we have a responsibility to do this, So we ended up packing up all of our stuff, and we moved to California, where we are now, Bakersfield, because we have family here. And we thought, if we're going to travel, if we're going to lean into all these different things, we're going to need family as a support. So we have family here in California. So we moved here to California to kind of create that family support system, and to kind of relaunch our travel ministry and base it here. And we filled up our schedule with, 6 or 7 weeks worth of tour dates. And then this pandemic kind of came and snuck up on us. So we kind of had to pivot a little bit. So we're doing a lot of online content. We're creating content for different churches, and, doing, kind of helping provide resources for churches as far as worship goes. We film once or twice a week here in Bakersfield for different churches, and just doing what we can in the meantime. And then on top of all of that, my wife has been wanting to start a nonprofit to kind of like a mom's community. She really wants to be a resource for moms who need diapers or whatever they need. So on top of kind of rebuilding our travel ministry, we're stepping into this nonprofit world and kind of trying to connect the two, with music always being our background. And now this, we call it a mission field. A mission field isn't just what's across the pond or overseas, but somebody once told me your greatest mission field is the 50 feet in front of you and the 50 feet around you. That's your greatest mission opportunity. So we're calling it a mission, a mission field for us. So we're connecting music and missions and just kind of navigating what that looks like, in this season. And when the world kind of is open again, we hope to add that as part of what we do when we travel, is kind of raising awareness to that. We actually had the opportunity over the Easter weekend to bless 40 families. We social distancing is a tricky thing. So what we did is we just egged a bunch of people's yards with little Easter eggs. A bunch of moms reached out to us and said, "Hey, I would love for my kids to be able to hunt Easter eggs, even in this crazy situation that we're in currently." So we were able to egg, if you will, 40 yards, bless 40 families, in just a small way, But that's kind of the things that we're doing, and just trying to think outside of the box, and take what we spent our 20s doing, and hopefully really kind of solidify it in this season, and just staying busy.
Well, I want people to be able to go and listen to the music that you've already put out there, because Jeff and I have been watching it, I believe, on Sunday nights. Is that correct? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talk about how people can view what you've already done, how they can learn more about what you're doing, and if they want you, when all this pandemic stuff is over, how they can reach out to you, possibly to come to their church for a Sunday morning, or maybe a women's event or a men's event. How can they get to you?
Absolutely. Well, again, all the content we're creating, we decided that we should do, be able to go, just give our community something during this season. So we go live every Sunday night on our Johnny and Natalie Facebook. It's facebook.com /the Burkhalters, which is our last name. We don't have a cool band name. We're just the Burkhalters. Facebook.com /the Burkhalters. Every Sunday night we go live and we do some worship. We're doing some interviews, and this particular month is Mother's Day. So we've been highlighting some influential women in the faith space. So Facebook every Sunday night. And as far as booking, TFG management at yahoo.com. That's how you can kind of connect with us. We'll do anything. We'll come play for your kids' church. We've never done that, but we would do it. I think now we're so hungry for live worship, with people in the room. We'll do whatever, if it's a tent revival, just, put a fan on us. We're ready to go.
Well, great. So listeners, make sure that you look at the show notes, because I'll have links to all that Johnny just shared. Well, sweet friend, it is time for us to draw this to a close. So let's talk about what your one takeaway is.
I think my one takeaway in all of this, and kind of the backbone to my story, is that despite what your background is, always chase your dreams. I've met so many people who, for whatever reason, looked at their history and thought that had to be their destiny. But I think you can rewrite your history. I don't come from a family of musicians. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, which is kind of what we're doing now in our ministry, creating that. I don't come from any of that. I went to 6 weeks of community college. And I don't have any kind of, my background does not match, my dream. My history doesn't match my destiny. But if I had one takeaway today, I would say that no matter what your background, always follow your dreams. And no matter what your history, you are in control of your destiny. And if you're a person of faith, you're not in it alone. even if you're not a person of faith, and hopefully one day you'll have that experience, but you're not in this thing alone. And I think in my experience, I can say this: if you're born to do it, if you're supposed to do it, opportunity to do it is going to present itself. It just is. It's just the kind of the law of nature. I don't know what you would call it, but if you're supposed to do it, there'll be an opportunity for it. Work hard, be consistent, which is not always easy, but be consistent with your dreams. And if it's not your history, it doesn't mean it can't be your destiny.
That is beautifully said. And I love the part of your story where you didn't have that background, but you felt led and you felt called to worship, to ministry, to playing your music. And it is blessing thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. And you're right. Just because you don't have that background doesn't necessarily mean that you are limited as to what you can do. And I think your story is the perfect example of that. And Johnny, thank you so much for sharing about music and your history and why it's so meaningful to you. In this month that we're doing a focus on music, you have put visual images to what music is to our ears. And I just absolutely love what you shared today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a blast.
Okay, listeners, this is the part where we talk about our takeaway, and that is when life zigs and zags, and you know it will, follow those dreams, no matter what your background is. Johnny is living proof that you can make something that you are called for. So go out and do it, friends. Wow, I have listened to this episode several times, and each time I have pen and paper and I write down different notes because Johnny has such great insight about how music is expressive. And I feel that very much when I listen to music. In these crazy days of COVID-19, I had to, like many other podcasters, record all my episodes on Zoom. And in full disclosure, the first time I interviewed Johnny, it just didn't record. And I'm taking full responsibility. He was gracious, and I thank him so much for re-recording this episode because the second time, y'all, was even better than the first. Please make sure and follow him on all your social media at The Johnny B. You will hear great music and see fun pics of his family. This month of music has been incredible. I love music. And Mark Lee and Johnny have shared such unique perspectives on why music touches each of us. The guest on my next episode on May 29th is not only a musician, but she's also an overcomer. And I cannot wait to share her episode. Oh, it's extra special in that it is my 100th Overcomer interview. You don't want to miss it. Until then, listen to music that speaks to your heart and keep moving forward.